High up in the silent ridges of the Rockies, where the wind howls like a restless spirit and snowcaps linger long after spring, there lived a man who wanted nothing more than to disappear. His name was Jacob Hawthorne, a mountain man with a scarred past, a man who had chosen the loneliness of the wilderness over the chaos of human hearts. But one night, when the moon shone pale silver on his cabin, Jacob stepped outside to the sound of creaking wood and found something no man would ever expect: a young blonde woman hanging from his roof, her wrists bound in rough rope, her body trembling as the words carved into her flesh glowed red with pain. "Apache Lover" burned into Jacob's heart, slammed against his ribs. He had seen strange things in his years: bear attacks, drunken hunters stumbling lost, even the frozen body of a miner caught under an avalanche. But never this. She wasn't dead. Her shallow breaths and frantic eyes told him she clung desperately to life. Without thinking, Jacob cut her down, cradling her broken form as her lips tried to shape words but failed. In that moment, Jacob, the man who wanted no company, no past, no reminders, knew that fate had forced him into a story far larger than the mountain silence he worshipped. And as he carried her inside, he whispered to himself words that felt like both a promise and a curse. "You're safe now, whoever you are." Jacob nursed her through the night, bandaging her wounds, feeding her spoonfuls of water. Her skin was scarred with cruelty, her body weak from torment, yet her spirit glimmered through every shiver. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked like a branch in the wind. "My name is Clara," she whispered. "They call me traitor, because I loved who they hate." Jacob, though hardened by years of solitude, felt something he thought was buried: anger, not at her but at the world that would mark someone with such cruelty. She told him in fragments of a love she had once shared with an Apache man named Ahiu, a love that defied her family, her town, her people. They called her a disgrace, cursed her, and one night men dragged her away. They branded her with those words, hung her up to die, and left her in the wild as punishment for following her heart. Jacob could hardly believe it. Yet as he listened, the pain in Clara's voice rang too true to be a lie. He saw her not as a stranger but as someone who carried a wound deeper than the skin, one carved by the world's hatred of love it could not understand. As the days passed, Jacob found himself drawn to her courage. She should have been broken, yet her eyes still carried fire. And in caring for her, something began to thaw in him too. The loneliness that once felt safe now seemed hollow. Clara filled the silence with a strength he hadn't known he needed. But peace in the mountains never lasts. One evening, Jacob spotted movement beyond the tree line: men, rifles slung over their shoulders, faces he recognized from the valley towns below. They were searching, hunting, and Jacob knew in his gut they hadn't come for deer. These were the same men who had left Clara to die, and now they wanted to finish what they started. Fear gripped Clara when she saw them, but Jacob's voice was steady, low, like the growl of the mountains themselves. "They'll not touch you again. Not while I'm breathing." The men came closer, their boots crunching snow. They shouted for Jacob to hand her over, calling her Apache trash and traitor. But Jacob, who once thought he wanted nothing from the world, stood his ground, a rifle steady in his hands. He wasn't just fighting for her, he was fighting against the cruelty that had stolen too much already. The standoff stretched into silence, the kind where even the trees seemed to wait. Finally, Jacob spoke words he hadn't planned, words that felt like truth carved out of stone. "If love is your crime, then I'm guilty too." The men cursed, threatened, even raised their rifles, but they weren't ready for Jacob's fury. A fight erupted, snow flying, gunfire cracking, fists colliding with flesh. Jacob, hardened by years of mountain living, fought like a man who had found a reason worth bleeding for. In the chaos, Clara's screams cut through, not of fear but of defiance. She wasn't hiding anymore, she stood with him, her spirit unbroken, her voice daring the men to do worse than they already had. By the time the smoke cleared, the cowards fled, dragging their wounded with them. They hadn't killed Jacob, and they hadn't taken Clara. And in that quiet aftermath, Jacob realized something. Solitude had protected him, but love had given him something worth protecting. Clara wept into his chest, not just from relief but from the weight of years of hate falling away. And Jacob, the lonely mountain man, whispered the words she needed most. You don't have to be alone anymore. Seasons passed, snow melted into rivers, and Clara's scars began to fade though they never fully disappeared. They became symbols of her survival, not her shame. The mountains that once held only silence now echoed with laughter, with voices raised not in pain but in hope. Jacob, once lost in his solitude, found that in saving her, she had saved him too. And together, they carried a message carved deeper than any wound. Love is not a crime, and no hatred can burn it away. And for anyone who hears their story, one truth remains. Sometimes the people we save are the very ones who come to save us. Would you have had the courage to stand, like Jacob did, against the world's cruelty, for love, for dignity, for what is right? Because in the end, it's not the mountains or the scars that define us. It's what we choose to protect.